Is May 10th, 1954, in Dayton, Ohio. Inside a conference hall at the Institute of Radio Engineers, speaker after speaker takes the podium to explain why silicon transistors are still years away. The melting point is too high, the material is too reactive, manufacturing is impractical. The audience is beginning to lose interest when a quiet physicist from an obscure Dallas company steps forward. His name is Gordon Teal, and he works for Texas Instruments. He calmly says, "Contrary to what my colleagues have told you about the bleak prospects for silicon transistors, I happen to have a few of them here in my pocket." Then he reaches into his jacket and pulls them out. Working silicon transistors. Not experimental prototypes, not laboratory curiosities, devices already being manufactured. The room falls silent. In a single moment, years of accepted wisdom collapse. The company behind Gordon Teal did not begin in electronics. It began by listening to the earth for oil. What happened between those two facts is one of the most remarkable transformations in American technological history. You're watching Soccer Universe. If you enjoy stories about the innovations, rivalries, and breakthroughs that change the world, subscribe and join us for more. Because the company that helped invent the microchip started by bouncing sound waves off underground rock, and the journey from there to the center of the digital age is even more extraordinary than it sounds. In 1930, physicist J. Clarence Karcher and engineer Eugene McDermott founded Geophysical Service in Dallas, Texas. Their business was reflection seismology, sending sound waves deep into the ground and analyzing the echoes to locate hidden oil deposits. Oil explorer Everett Lee DeGolyer invested $100,000 to launch the venture, but the oil industry was unpredictable. By the late 1930s, the company reorganized, spinning its geophysical operations into a subsidiary called GSI. Then history intervened. On December 6, 1941, the day before Pearl Harbor, four GSI employees, Eugene McDermott, J. Eric Johnson, Cecil H. Green, and H. Bates Peacock, purchased the subsidiary. Within months, America was at war. The rugged electronic equipment GSI had designed for harsh oil fields suddenly became ideal for military radar, communications, and submarine detection. The company that had searched for oil found itself building electronics for the U.S. Navy and Army Signal Corps. The war permanently changed its DNA. In November 1945, a young former naval officer named Patrick Haggerty joined the company. A brilliant engineering graduate from Marquette University, Haggerty looked beyond the wartime contracts and recognized something few others could see. The future wasn't finding oil. The future was building the instruments. In 1951, the company officially became Texas Instruments. Annual revenue was roughly $20 million. In the rapidly growing electronics industry, TI was still almost invisible. But Patrick Haggerty had no intention of remaining that way. In 1952, he convinced Gordon Teal to leave Bell Laboratories and build Texas Instruments Central Research Laboratories from scratch. Teal was one of the world's leading crystal physicists. At Bell Labs, he had mastered the difficult process of growing extremely pure semiconductor crystals. Bell Labs had invented the transistor in 1947, but those early devices were made from germanium, a material with serious limitations. Silicon promised better performance, higher temperatures, and greater reliability, but nobody had figured out how to manufacture it economically. There is an important historical detail that deserves recognition. In January 1954, Bell Labs chemist Morris Tannenbaum successfully built the first working silicon transistor, but Bell Labs decided the manufacturing process was too difficult for commercial production. Gordon Teal and chemist Willis Adcock took the next step. They transformed the laboratory breakthrough into a product that could actually be manufactured and sold. They tested their production-ready silicon transistor on April 14, 1954. 4 weeks later, Gordon Teal carried those devices into the conference in Dayton. History often remembers the invention. It remembers far less often the people who make an invention practical. Patrick Haggerty believed transistors belonged in ordinary homes, not just military equipment. In May 1954, Texas Instruments designed a prototype transistor radio and offered it to America's biggest manufacturers. RCA rejected it. Philco rejected it. Emerson rejected it. Every major radio company passed. Only one small company said yes. the Regency Division of Industrial Development Engineering Associates in Indianapolis. On October 18, 1954, the Regency TR1 was announced. By November, it was selling for $49.95, nearly $550 in today's money. Consumer Reports described the sound quality as merely adequate for speech and disappointing for music. It didn't matter. For the first time, a radio fit inside a shirt pocket. About 150,000 units sold. Teenagers carried rock and roll to beaches, parks, schools, and city streets. More importantly, the word transistor entered everyday American language. Texas Instruments' revenue climbed from $20 million to more than $90 million during the decade. But the transistor radio was only the beginning. The real revolution was waiting inside a nearly empty laboratory. In the summer of 1958, an electrical engineer from Great Bend, Kansas, joined Texas Instruments. His name was Jack Kilby. For years, Kilby had been obsessed with one problem: not transistors, not speed, not power, wiring. Computers required thousands of separate components connected by miles of hand-soldered wires. Every additional connection increased the chance of failure. Kilby imagined something radically different. What if every component could be built from the same piece of semiconductor material? No endless wiring, no massive assemblies, just one integrated device. Ironically, his greatest opportunity came because he wasn't allowed to take a vacation. As a new employee, Kilby didn't qualify for Texas Instruments' mandatory summer shutdown. While nearly everyone else left for 2 weeks, he stayed behind alone in the laboratory. Silence, empty workbenches, nothing but time and an idea. When his colleagues returned on September 12, 1958, Kilby showed them a tiny device assembled from germanium, gold wire, aluminum, a transistor, resistors, and a capacitor. It wasn't beautiful. One observer later joked that it looked like a failed art project, but when electricity flowed through it, it worked. Texas Instruments filed the patent in February 1959. Only one company immediately understood what they had just seen: Fairchild Semiconductor. There, Robert Noyce had independently been developing his own silicon integrated circuit. Noyce filed his patent later that year. A decade of legal battles followed before both inventors ultimately shared recognition. History is often tempted to choose a single winner. Reality is usually more complicated. Jack Kilby built the first working integrated circuit. Robert Noyce developed the practical silicon version that transformed manufacturing. Modern electronics exist because of both men. In 2000, Jack Kilby received the Nobel Prize in Physics. During his acceptance speech, he publicly acknowledged that Robert Noyce would almost certainly have shared the prize had he still been alive. Only 6 of Kilby's original integrated circuits survive today. One rests inside the Smithsonian Institution. Throughout the Cold War, defense contracts funded Texas Instruments' relentless research. The company developed radar systems, missile guidance electronics, infrared technology, and laser-guided weapons. Military investment quietly financed many of the breakthroughs that would later transform civilian life. Patrick Haggerty wasn't satisfied. He wanted integrated circuits to become household technology, just as transistors had. Kilby joined engineers Jerry Merriman and Jim Van Tassel to create something ordinary families could actually buy. The project was codenamed Caltech. By 1967, the prototype electronic calculator was complete. In 1972, Texas Instruments introduced the TI 2500 datamath. Then came the TI 30, affordable, reliable, simple. It became one of the best-selling calculators ever made. Generations of students would stare at its display, watching the word error appear after one mistaken calculation. Then, Texas Instruments created something no one had expected: a talking computer. In November 1976, engineer Paul Breedlove received an unusual assignment. With only $25,000 and 3 months, determine whether an integrated circuit could reproduce human speech. Working alongside Gene France and Richard Wiggins, Breedlove developed the TMC-0280, the world's first single-chip speech synthesizer. Dallas radio announcer Mitch Carr recorded the voice. His calm, clear pronunciation became the personality of an entirely new machine. The result was Speak and Spell. Bright orange, plastic, a keyboard, hundreds of words, and a robotic voice that patiently encouraged children to try again. When it debuted in 1978, it instantly became one of the most recognizable electronic toys ever created. 4 years later, Steven Spielberg placed one inside E.T. the Extraterrestrial. The toy became immortal. In 2009, the IEEE officially recognized Speak and Spell as a milestone in electrical engineering. Its speech chip eventually appeared in arcade machines, automobiles, and countless other products. But while millions of children listened to a toy learning to speak, Texas Instruments was walking toward one of the biggest mistakes in its history. In 1979, the company entered the home computer market. The TI 99-4 was ambitious, powerful, one of the first 16-bit home computers. It even included a color monitor, but it also carried a price tag of more than $1,100. Waiting on the other side was Commodore, and Commodore's leader, Jack Tramiel, remembered everything. Years earlier, Texas Instruments had nearly destroyed Commodore's calculator business through aggressive price cuts. Tramiel never forgot. He responded by buying MOS technology, securing his own chip supply. Now the advantage belonged to Commodore. As computer prices collapsed during the early 1980s, Texas Instruments matched every reduction. Commodore lowered prices. TI followed. Commodore cut again. TI matched again. Eventually, Texas Instruments was losing money on every computer it sold. Factories shipped thousands of machines every day. Warehouses emptied. Store shelves filled. But selling products below manufacturing cost is not a strategy. It's a countdown. The third quarter of 1983 delivered the verdict. Texas Instruments reported a staggering $330 million loss. Almost all of it came from the home computer business. Within weeks, the TI 99-4A was discontinued. Remaining inventory was liquidated for as little as $20. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. The company that had pioneered the integrated circuit, the handheld calculator, and the speech synthesizer had nearly destroyed itself, chasing a market it could never control. But Texas Instruments survived, not because it won, because it knew when to retreat. The company abandoned the spotlight and returned to what it had always done better than almost anyone else on Earth, designing chips, not flashy consumer products, not expensive computers, the invisible analog semiconductors and embedded processors hidden inside other companies' devices. The components no one notices, the components every modern machine depends upon. That decision saved the company. Today, collectors still restore TI 99-4A computers. Speak and Spell toys continue to sell decades after production ended. Millions of students still rely on TI calculators every school year. And Texas Instruments has become something even more powerful than a famous consumer brand. It has become infrastructure. Nearly a century after Karcher and McDermott first bounced sound waves into Texas rock formations searching for oil, Texas Instruments employs tens of thousands of people, generates billions in annual revenue, and manufactures the semiconductor technology that quietly powers the modern world. The integrated circuit Jack Kilby assembled during a lonely summer vacation now exists inside smartphones, automobiles, satellites, medical equipment, industrial machines, and countless devices carrying someone else's logo. Most people will never notice the tiny Texas Instruments chip hidden inside. That's the point. In 1954, Gordon Teal reached into his pocket and revealed the future. More than 70 years later, Texas Instruments is still quietly carrying that future inside billions of pockets around the world. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe